Hi, I'm Madeline Carter. For 6 years, I was the one who filled in the gaps. I paid the rent when my parents fell short. I covered my sister Lillian's tuition, my dad's medical bills, even the second car my mom insisted she needed. I thought it was love, quiet, steady, behind the scenes kind of love. Then the house caught fire, and when I showed up at my mother's door, drenched and shaking, all she said was, "This isn't a shelter." That was the moment I understood. I was never really family. I was just the funding. So I cut off every account, every auto payment, every transfer, and by sunrise, I had 53 missed calls. But none of them asked if I had a place to sleep. Before we dive in, what would you have done if you realized you were only valuable when you were needed? Leave a comment. I read them all. I really do. I was 12 when I taught myself how to fold napkins into maple leaves. Not the simple triangle or the rushed roll we usually did, but the kind you'd see in a magazine. Delicate creases, curled tips, edges smoothed with an iron so the folds would hold their breath. I watched the tutorial 3 times, paused it in between, practiced until the fabric looked like something alive. That Thanksgiving morning, I set the table in silence, placing each napkin precisely next to the plates, one at a slight angle, one just beneath the edge of the fork. It wasn't about perfection. It was about hoping someone would notice. My mother walked in just as I was adjusting the last one. She glanced at the table, paused at the napkins, then frowned. "Why do you always have to overdo everything, Madeline?" she muttered, as if I'd spilled something. Then she called over her shoulder, "Lillian, bring out the pecan pie." Lillian came in carrying a dish from the kitchen, still warm, and Mom lit up. "Now look at that crust, so thin, just beautiful." I stepped back, dust still on my hands from the bread rolls I'd helped knead. No one mentioned the napkins again. That night, after everyone had gone upstairs, I gathered them one by one, unfolded each shape slowly, flattened every crease until they were just cloth again. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just dropped them in the laundry basket and turned off the light. I remember that moment not because it was loud or cruel, but because it was quiet, sharp in its simplicity. That's when I learned that in our house, effort didn't mean affection, attention was rationed, love, conditional, and somewhere in that silence, I made a decision. If trying meant being too much, maybe not trying at all would be safer. Maybe being invisible would hurt less than being noticed only to be dismissed. That was the year I stopped folding napkins and started folding myself. The house on Willow Creek Lane still smelled like burnt wood when I parked 2 blocks away. The road was closed off, caution tape fluttering in the breeze like an afterthought. Fire trucks had come and gone. The porch had collapsed inward, the white paint streaked with soot. Bricks blackened beneath gray ash. From a distance, it might have looked like someone had taken a match to a photograph, edges curling, center hollowed out, but still hauntingly familiar. I stood there, in the quiet aftermath, looking at what used to be the home my family lived in, the home I paid for. They had called it theirs, but the bank statements said otherwise. Every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every emergency plumber visit, I handled it, and I lived in a studio apartment 4 miles away, just in case they ever needed me. They never did, or maybe they did, just not in ways that required a phone call. No one had told me it burned. Not my mother, not my father, not Lillian, not a single cousin, neighbor, or old family friend. No missed calls, no voicemails. Just a photo I saw online, posted by a local news outlet, early morning blaze on Willow Creek Lane. I recognized the mailbox. I called them. I dialed the house first, straight to voicemail. Then my mother. She picked up on the third ring, sounding like someone mildly inconvenienced by a delivery arriving late. "It's all gone," she said flatly. "The fridge, the china set, Lillian's photos. Nothing left." I waited, giving her space for the next sentence, the one where she might say thank you for keeping the insurance active, for wiring the payments each month without being asked. But all she added was, "Lillian says it was probably faulty wiring. We told you that place needed work. No apology. No question about where I was or how I found out. just blame in a tone so casual it didn't even register as cruel until much later. I drove back to my studio apartment in a fog. It had rained the night before, and the streets were slick, puddles blooming beneath the tires. When I reached my building, the hallway was soaked. Again. A fire in the neighboring unit had set off the sprinklers for the second time that month. My carpet was ruined. The air smelled like mildew and resignation. I stood there for nearly 2 hours before my knees gave out, sinking to the floor in damp jeans and silence. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat with it all. The water, the smoke, the hollow tone in my mother's voice. There wasn't a single moment of recognition in any of it. Not one word that suggested I belonged, that I was thought of, that my number was the first one dialed, or even the last. Later that night, I drove to Silverfield. The rain had picked up again, sharp, needling through my jacket, soaking into my sleeves. By the time I reached the long stone driveway, I was trembling, not from cold, from something deeper, something old. I rang the bell once. My mother opened the door half in shadow, arms crossed. She wore one of those silk robes that looked expensive and unfriendly. Behind her, the lights were warm. Lillian stood by the kitchen island in a cashmere wrap, swirling red wine in a glass like nothing had happened. She looked at me, said nothing. "I just need a few nights," I said, voice thin, "until I figure something out." Julia exhaled slow, deliberate. "This isn't a shelter. Madeline, you're not some refugee." I swallowed hard. "Just until I can find another apartment." She shook her head, already turning away. "Ask one of those charities you donate to, or maybe one of the cousins you helped through school. Try using that generosity on yourself for once." She gestured vaguely, dismissively. Lillian didn't move, just tilted her head, like she was watching a rerun she'd already seen. I didn't beg. I turned, stepped back into the rain, and let the cold wrap around me like armor. I sat in my car, engine off, windshield fogged, staring into the kind of darkness that doesn't ask for answers. Drops slid down my cheeks, and I couldn't tell if they were rain or mine. No one followed, no one texted, no one asked where I was going. And somewhere on Route 17 between smoke and wet pavement, I realized the truth. I wasn't family. I was a utility. I was useful. Until I wasn't. Until I needed something. Until I showed up soaked and unshakably human. And that made me dangerous. The rain had followed me all the way back to Silverfield, soaking through the seams of my coat by the time I pulled into the stone-lined driveway. My fingers hesitated on the keys as I shut off the engine. For a moment, I sat there, staring up at the familiar outline of the house, the porch light glowing like it had something to say. The second-floor window still cracked open just enough to let the warmth slip out. I used to think that window was left open for me. I don't know why. I climbed the steps slowly, the soles of my boots dragging a little as if even they weren't sure this was the right move. The bell was still the same, a small gold circle you pressed with your thumb. I rang it once and stepped back. The sound echoed through the door like it was searching for permission to let me in. It didn't take long. Julia opened the door halfway, the same silk robe from the night before cinched tight around her waist, hair pulled back like she hadn't rested, but still refused to unravel. Her eyes flicked down to my soaked jeans, then back up to my face. I didn't speak right away. Neither did she. Behind her, the entryway glowed amber with soft light. The smell of something warm, maybe roasted garlic or baked bread, floated faintly in the air. Lillian stood by the island in the kitchen, arms folded, glass of wine in hand. She saw me. She didn't move. "I just need a few nights," I said quietly, my voice stripped of any demand, any fight, "until I figure something out." Julia's lips tightened into a straight line. "This isn't a shelter. Madeline." Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was bored. "You're not some refugee." The words didn't land all at once. They unfolded, slow and deliberate, like a door closing in stages. I cleared my throat, "Just until I can get another lease lined up. A week, maybe less." She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding the breath for years and was finally letting it out. "Ask one of those organizations you give to, or one of your friends from work." Better yet, call the cousins you paid tuition for. You've spent a lot of your life helping other people. Maybe try helping yourself for once. Her hand waved vaguely behind her, as if brushing away a fly or the years I had spent keeping this entire family upright. The front door remained only halfway open, like a body blocking an exit. I looked past her, just once, to Lillian. Her arms hadn't moved. She tilted her head, eyes unreadable, a face I knew so well, and no longer recognized. I didn't ask again. I nodded, not out of agreement, just acknowledgement, the kind of nod you give when you finally understand the rules were never meant to include you. I turned back toward the steps, rain pressing down harder now, turning cold fabric colder. My feet carried me forward with more steadiness than I felt. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. No one stopped me. No one said my name. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, windshield fogging over as the warmth left the car, water collected on the windows, tiny rivers sliding downward, erasing whatever I might have seen on the way here. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. No calls, no second chances. The porch light stayed on, but the door never opened again. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, it wasn't grief that sat with me. It was clarity, cold and clean. I wasn't leaving because they didn't love me. I was leaving because I finally understood the kind of love they offered was built on access, not welcome. And I had nothing left to give them that didn't cost me more than I was willing to pay. That was the last time I knocked on that door, not out of pride, but because I knew, once and for all, it wasn't mine to open. The motel room didn't smell clean. Not really. It smelled like lemon-scented effort, bleach and something older trying to be forgotten. The towel they gave me was thin, fraying at the corners, and the soap left a film on my skin. But when I stepped out of the shower that morning, wrapped in rough cotton and still damp at the edges, I felt clearer than I had in years. It was 4:12 a.m. The sky outside was a dull charcoal gray. Not quite night, not yet morning. The heater buzzed in the corner like it wasn't sure it could hold on much longer. I sat on the edge of the bed, towel still wrapped around my shoulders, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered awake like an old friend reluctantly rising from sleep. I connected to the motel's weak Wi-Fi, just one bar, but it was enough. Bank of America, Chase, PayPal, Zelle, one by one. I logged in, one by one. I began to close the doors. First, I canceled every automatic payment linked to their names. Then I disabled the card I'd given my father to cover emergency groceries. Paused the health insurance draft that had covered Mom's prescriptions for the last 3 years. Deleted the $1.200 recurring transfer labeled household. The one I'd been sending monthly without being asked, without fail. Every click felt like removing a hook from my skin. I didn't move quickly. I didn't rage. I just moved, methodically, precisely, like I was disarming something that had been ticking quietly beneath my life for far too long. When I reached the last account, my hand hovered over the mouse for a moment. My mother's phone number was listed in the notification settings. I deleted it. I added mine. If they needed help, they could ask out loud. By the time the sun cracked through the cloud line, lighting up the dust along the motel windowsill, my phone began to buzz, once, then again. I glanced at the screen. 18 missed calls from my mother, 14 from Tyler, 11 from Lillian, a few more from scattered names I hadn't seen in months. Cousin Rachel, Dad, even Mrs. Felton, the neighbor who still had my crock pot. No messages, no texts asking where I'd slept, if I was okay, if I needed anything. Just panic, not for me, but for what I'd taken with me. The phone vibrated again, nearly tumbling off the cheap nightstand. I caught it before it fell, glanced at the latest message. Madeline, call me now. Don't you dare cut off the mortgage autopay. That was it. Not, are you safe? Not what happened. Not I'm sorry. Just fear, not of loss, but of inconvenience. I let the phone drop back onto the thin blanket beside me. The room around me hadn't changed. Still beige walls, still low ceilings, still stale air that never quite aired out. But something in my chest was different, lighter, not in joy, but in honesty. No one had called me until the money stopped. That was the headline. That was the truth. I lay back slowly, arms crossed over my chest, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. My fingers relaxed, my jaw unclenched. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't lonely, it wasn't cold, it was mine. The motel coffee tasted like burnt paper and regret, but I drank it anyway, slow, steady, letting the bitterness remind me I was still here, still thinking, still breathing. The phone sat on the edge of the nightstand like a restless animal, buzzing every few minutes with another missed call, another demand. I ignored it. I'd spent enough of my life listening. It wasn't until mid-morning that I opened the Facebook app, not to post, just to watch. I knew Julia still used the Silverfield neighborhood group. She used to share pictures of her flower beds, holiday wreaths, Lillian's piano recitals, but this time, it wasn't roses or seasonal garlands pinned to the top of the page. It was me, or rather, the version of me they preferred. Prayers for the family on Willow Creek Lane. The post began, above a photo of the burned-out house. They've lost so much. First the fire, then their support system. No one deserves betrayal like this, not from within. Dozens of comments followed, some from neighbors I vaguely remembered, others from names I didn't recognize at all. I heard the eldest daughter just walked away. No explanation. Cold. Some people forget blood when the money stops. It's always the ones who look responsible that end up heartless. Not a single word about the $143,000 I'd spent over the past 6 years. Not the tuition checks, not the grocery runs, not the second car lease, not the insurance premiums that had kept that house covered, until the fire. Just silence where my effort used to live. And in its place, a new narrative that I was cruel, that I had abandoned them. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the comment section. I thought about typing something, maybe just a line or two of truth. But I didn't. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood it wouldn't matter. They weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for a villain. And I was convenient. The daughter who never married, who worked too much, who didn't show up to enough Sunday dinners, who didn't coo at babies or make casseroles or post selfies in matching family t-shirts. The one who always paid but never belonged. I wasn't being punished for cruelty. I was being punished for no longer being useful. That afternoon, I sat at the tiny desk in the corner of the room and opened my spreadsheet. The one I kept not because anyone asked me to, but because I needed something to prove I was real. That I had shown up, again and again. Every dollar was there. Groceries, medical bills, emergency tuition, Lillian's vet bill, Dad's cholesterol meds, Julia's landscaping service when she said her back couldn't handle the yard. All of it. The total was dizzying, not just in money, but in years. In birthdays missed because I was working overtime. In dinners skipped because I was wiring funds before midnight. In all the small ways I said I love you that no one ever called love. And still, here I was, the villain of the family chat thread. I looked back at the Facebook post, scrolled one last time, then closed the app, let them talk. Because if I had learned anything in the last 24 hours, it was this: when you stop being who they can use, they'll call you dangerous, and when you dare to walk away, they'll call you heartless. But I wasn't either. I was just done. The envelope came in the morning, no return address, just my name and room number written in hurried cursive across the front. The motel clerk handed it to me without a word, the kind of silence that understands not to ask. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and peeled it open. Inside was a stack of papers, crisp but aged at the corners, carrying the heavy scent of something stored too long. The top sheet was familiar, an insurance claim header, dated a few weeks after the fire. My eyes scanned the page quickly at first, then slower, then still. Under beneficiary, I saw my name, typed neatly, and then crossed out. A thicker line ran straight through it, correction fluid smeared across the letters, and underneath, in slanted blue ink, a new name had been written: Lillian Carter. There was no official amendment, no signature from me, no notary stamp, just a name scratched out and replaced, like a typo, like I had never belonged there in the first place. And then, on the bottom of the page, a signature I recognized instantly: Thomas Carter, my father, no explanation, just him, and a pen, like he was editing a grocery list. I held the paper for a long time, fingers resting lightly over where my name used to be. It wasn't anger that came first. It wasn't even shock. It was something quieter. The sound a door makes when it closes all the way. That click of finality. I thought back to the fire, to the insurance payments I'd kept active for years. They'd never thanked me. But I hadn't done it for thanks. I did it because I believed, naively, that I was part of something, that even if I wasn't invited to the table, I was still counted in the head count. Apparently, I wasn't. I remembered a red binder, 2 years ago. The kitchen had flooded from a burst pipe, and Julia had handed me the folder like a casserole she didn't want to carry anymore. Just in case anything happens, she'd said with an uncharacteristic softness. I offered to digitize the documents, to back them up. She smiled, waved me off. No need, it's all sorted. Turns out, it was, just not for me. I drove to the county records office that afternoon, a low beige building tucked between a gas station and an abandoned pharmacy. The walls were lined with faded posters about disaster relief. The air inside smelled like old toner and resignation. The clerk's name tag read Deborah. She looked like someone who had seen too many people walk in with questions they already knew the answers to. "I'm here to request a copy of a residential fire insurance claim," I said, sliding the envelope across the counter. "Filed about 5 weeks ago. I believe I'm listed on the policy." Or, I was. She adjusted her glasses, took the document, and frowned. "Give me a few minutes." I stood by the counter, staring at the muted TV mounted in the corner. A weather report played on loop. Cold front moving in. Chance of rain. No mention of fires. No mention of the things people don't see coming. 10 minutes passed. When Deborah returned, she held a stapled packet in her hand. "There was an amendment filed 3 weeks before the fire," she said quietly. "Beneficiary changed to Lillian Carter. You're not listed anywhere now." I nodded. Once. That was all I needed. Not more words, not a reason. Just confirmation that what I felt was real, that the erasure wasn't just emotional, it was signed, sealed, and on file. I walked back to my car without speaking, closed the door gently, let my hands rest on the steering wheel, unmoving. Inside that silence, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened to the absence of illusion, the echo of what it means to be replaced not by accident, but by design. Back in the motel room, I sat at the desk with the envelope still open beside me. The insurance papers lay in quiet defiance, the whiteout already fading at the edges, as if even the correction wanted to confess. I should have been used to it by now, being crossed out, but something about seeing it in ink, beside my father's signature, made it final in a way no silence ever had. I opened my laptop, its hinges creaking like a protest. On the desktop was a folder I'd carried across 5 moves and 2 jobs, labeled plainly Family Expenses. I clicked it open. The spreadsheet filled the screen, cells perfectly aligned like a timeline of small betrayals. I had built it years ago, not for control, not for credit, but because I thought keeping track meant I mattered, that if I could quantify my care, it would count. Row after row, $68.92, Dad's blood pressure meds, Walgreens $213.40, Lillian's vet bill emergency visit for Oscar, $1.500, Julia's car repair transmission issue $6.300 tuition payment fall semester. For Lillian's son $289.99, new mattress for guest room, so your father doesn't wake up sore, $400, back taxes, just temporary, we'll pay you back. I kept scrolling. The sum at the bottom grew heavy. Each entry was a moment I said yes when no one else even paused to ask, and looking at it now. It wasn't generosity, it was evidence of how far I was willing to go to be seen as more than the girl who never cried at the table, of how many ways I tried to earn a kind word that never arrived. I didn't keep receipts for praise. I kept them because they were the only proof I existed in this family outside of obligation. They didn't ask for my love. They asked for my PIN. They didn't remember my birthday, but they remembered the last 4 digits of my card. I clicked into the first row, highlighted it, pressed delete. The cell went blank, then the next, and the next, one by one. I began erasing myself from the story they had written. Not out of spite, but clarity. I wasn't family. I was function. And now, I was done functioning on command. Outside, the sky had turned that muted pale blue only cheap motel curtains can filter. Inside, the room smelled like old lemon and fried air, but I breathed easier than I had in months. I scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet, running total $143, 770.58. I said it out loud, not to feel proud, but to hear it spoken. Finally. To give weight to all the things I had been asked to carry quietly. Then I added a final line in bold last entry. No further charges. I closed the file, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had paid in full. The knock came just after 10. Not timid, not curious. 3 sharp raps, then 2 more in quick succession. I didn't move at first. I sat still on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed laptop on the nightstand. My hand resting on the curve of the trackpad like it was holding onto something steadier than this room. I stood slowly, walked to the door, and checked the peephole. Julia, my mother, standing beneath the flickering hallway light, her scarf soaked from the rain, clinging to her neck like something she couldn't shake off. Her coat looked expensive, her face looked unbothered. I opened the door just wide enough for the stale air between us to shift. She didn't ask to come in, just stepped past me like she had every right to occupy the space I was barely surviving in. Her heels clicked across the thin carpet, sharp and measured, like a countdown. She turned to face me, arms crossed, purse still in hand. "You've created a disaster," she said. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. "We've had to delay Lillian's mortgage. Your father can't show his face at church without people whispering. He's humiliated." I stood with my hands by my sides, letting the words fall around me like snow that would never stick. She stepped closer. "Do you even understand what you've done?" Then came the line I'll remember longer than anything else she ever said. "This isn't about the money, Madeline. It's about how you've made us look, not how I felt, not what I needed, not the sleepless nights or the overdraft fees or the way I used to check my account balance before buying groceries for them. Just the optics. Just the shame they couldn't control." I blinked. "That's what matters to you." She rolled her eyes like I'd missed the point. "People talk. They assume things." I nodded slowly. "Let them." She flinched. Just barely. The kind of reaction you only notice if you've spent your whole life watching for it. I took a breath. A long, steady one. Not to calm myself, but to clear space for the truth. "For years," I said, "I gave you everything you asked for. Not because you asked kindly, but because I believed. Deep down, that maybe one day, you'd see me. Not for what I gave, but for who I was." She didn't interrupt. Maybe she thought I'd run out of air. "I funded appearances," I added, "not people, and I'm done." She let out a short laugh, sharp at the edges. "So what now? You want us to crawl to beg you for help?" "No," I said. "I want you to manage the way I always had to. Quietly. Without thanks." Her face twisted, something between disbelief and insult. "You think you're better than us?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I think I just finally stopped pretending I'm less." That landed. I could see it. Not because she said anything, but because she didn't. She picked up her purse with the finality of a judge closing court. "You've changed." "No," I said softly. "I just finally stopped apologizing for not being Lillian." Her hand hesitated on the doorknob, like she might say something real for once, but old habits die hard. She turned without a word and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her like punctuation on a sentence I didn't write but had to finish reading anyway. I didn't cry. I didn't follow. I stood in the middle of that worn-out motel room, the quiet pressing in. Not heavy this time, just honest. She hadn't come to reconnect. She came to reassert control, and I hadn't given it. That was enough. 2 days passed before she showed up. No warning, no call. Just a figure behind the glass door of the cafe across from my new apartment. The kind of place with no table service, chipped mugs, and the faint smell of oversteeped tea clinging to the walls. I was already seated in the corner, back against the wall, fingers curled around a mug that had long gone cold when Lillian walked in. She looked smaller, not physically, just deflated. Hair pulled back in a limp ponytail. Jacket slightly too formal for a place like this. Her eyes scanned the room once before they landed on me, and she walked over like she wasn't sure the floor would hold. I didn't stand. She slid into the booth across from me, hands clenched so tightly the tips of her fingers had gone pale. She didn't speak right away. I didn't ask why she was there. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice cracked on the second word. "Mom's unraveling," she said, staring at the sugar jar between us. "She's convinced you're trying to destroy her." Dad barely says anything. He just sits at the garage door, waiting, like he thinks you're still going to walk in. I stirred my tea slowly, letting the silence stretch. Lillian blinked quickly, then again. She was holding herself together, but just barely. "They think you're punishing them," she added, her tone shifting into something more fragile. "But the truth is, you were the glue. You were the only one keeping anything upright." She let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, bitter and broken. "And we kicked you out like you were the problem." I met her eyes. "I know." She flinched, just slightly, looked away, took a breath like it hurt to say what came next. "Do you want us to beg?" she asked quietly. "Fine. I'm begging. Please, just help. One more time." The words didn't surprise me. They just clarified everything. I set my cup down. The porcelain tapped against the wood, a soft sound, but somehow final. "No," I said. Calm, even. Because it was never one more time. Lillian, it was always the next time. And then the one after that. She opened her mouth. But I held up a hand, not to silence her, but to steady the air. "You don't see me," I continued. "You see what I can give. You always have." For a moment. Her face wavered, like she might argue, like she might reach for the version of me who used to fold every burden into her hands without asking why. But the words didn't come, only the wet shimmer of pride slipping from her eyes. We paid separately. I left first. No hug, no promises, no goodbye. Outside. The afternoon light had begun to soften, casting the sidewalk in long shadows. I pulled my coat tighter and walked down the block without looking back. The space behind me didn't feel like a gap anymore. It felt like a boundary. And for once, it held. I didn't drive straight home after the cafe. I took a turn I hadn't planned. The road to Elm Ridge was quiet this time of year. Branches bare, the last of fall's color now pressed into the soil. The gate creaked open the way old things do, as if asking whether you're sure you want to come in. I was. It took less than 5 minutes to find her. Eleanor Carter, my grandmother. The only person who ever made me feel like I wasn't hard to love. When I was 12 and Lillian caught the flu right before my science fair. It wasn't Julia who stayed up helping me build my papier-mâché volcano. It was Grandma Eleanor, her sleeves rolled up, her glasses sliding down her nose, muttering about baking soda ratios like she was solving a national emergency. She never said things like, "You're too much" or "not now." She just looked at me like my thoughts were worth protecting. Like I was worth protecting. I knelt beside her stone, brushing away a few damp leaves, then pulled the photo from the inside pocket of my coat. It was old, soft at the corners. Me, missing 2 front teeth, laughing with my face tilted toward the sky. She had cotton candy on her cheek, a zoo in the background, and one arm wrapped tight around my shoulders like she didn't care if anyone saw how much she adored me. I slid the photo into a clear plastic sleeve and taped it to the back of her marker. A small act, but it felt like a promise, one that didn't need anyone else to understand it. "I know you'd tell me not to fight fire with fire," I whispered, "but you'd also say, 'Don't let them burn your name for warmth, baby.'" I stayed a while, let the wind move around me, let the quiet say what I didn't have words for. When I finally stood, the air felt different, not lighter, just honest. That evening, I arrived at the apartment, my apartment in the outskirts of Burlington. Second floor, no elevator, beige siding, red door, small, yes, but clean. And mine. There were no framed degrees on the walls, no family photos, just one potted plant on the windowsill, still alive somehow. I set my single bag down on the floor, walked into the kitchen, and opened my laptop. The spreadsheet was still there. Intact, untouched, like a quiet archive of everything I had once called love. I looked at the title for a long time, Family Expenses. Then I deleted it and typed something new, Proof of Love. Because love that needs receipts isn't love. And what I gave all those years, my time, my trust, my silence, none of it was wasted. It just wasn't seen by the people I hoped would notice. But here, in this small room with its chipped counter and humming heater, I didn't need anyone to notice anymore. I saw it. I saw me. The letter came folded into a thick envelope stamped with the firm's logo in bold. I knew the name. My parents had mentioned it years ago when they refinanced the house. Inside was a formal notice I was being sued. Financial abandonment. It read, emotional distress, disruption of family financial structure. They had turned my silence into a liability, my absence into a breach of duty. I didn't panic. I didn't pace or cry or stare at the ceiling like I used to when bills stacked higher than sleep. I simply picked up the phone and called Armand. He was calm. As always, my attorney, my friend, a man who didn't waste time on outrage, just moved straight to the center of things. I saw it coming, he said, his voice steady through the line. They want the optics of victimhood, but don't worry, this doesn't hold. I leaned back against the armrest of the couch, eyes fixed on the rain starting to blur the apartment window. You're the daughter erased from the will, he continued, and yet the same one who paid off their back taxes, carried their insurance, and covered their credit card debt. That kind of truth has a paper trail. Madeline. And judges like paper. I exhaled, letting the weight of that sentence land in the space between us. I don't feel bad, I said quietly. Good, he replied. You shouldn't, because for the first time in my life, I had said no, without apologizing for it. No, I won't sign the lease for Lillian's second car. No, I won't send another $300 for unexpected dental work. No, I won't carry a structure that collapses the moment I stop holding it up. This wasn't revenge. It was rebalancing. Let them file. Let them explain to a judge why the woman they claimed was emotionally cold also happened to be the financial heartbeat of their household for nearly a decade. Let them unpack the spreadsheets, the receipts, the transfers, the taxes. Let them read aloud the line item labeled November 12th, emergency fund dad forgot property taxes again. Let them try to turn generosity into guilt in a courtroom. I'd already served that sentence in private for years. I looked around the apartment, the chipped tile, the humming fridge, the quiet. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud. But it was mine. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was living, without justification, without needing a reason to put down my bag and say, this is far enough. I brewed a cup of tea, black and unsweetened, sat at the table where my spreadsheet still lay open. Only now. It wasn't evidence. It was closure. There would be more emails, more calls, more attempts to frame me as the one who broke something. But I didn't break the family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already fractured. And I stopped taping it together with my silence. It was late afternoon when the knock came. 3 soft taps, then one more. I didn't need to check. I already knew it was her. I opened the door halfway. Camille stood in the hallway. No earrings, no makeup, no performance. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I didn't invite her in. Just grabbed my keys, stepped outside, and pulled the door shut behind me. We walked in silence to the corner cafe. Sat at the same table where she once begged me to help one more time. She looked thinner now, like she'd been holding her breath for too long. Mom hasn't been the same, she said quietly, staring at the chipped sugar jar again. Dad doesn't leave the house. I waited. I know we crossed a line, she added, voice trembling, but maybe there's a way back. Maybe if you'd just come to the family meeting next week, help explain things. She didn't finish the sentence, just looked at me, eyes wide and watery. I took a sip of my coffee, set it down, then spoke with the calm I had earned, not inherited. I didn't leave because I was angry, I said. I left because I finally understood. Family without respect is just debt dressed up in good manners. Camille blinked, lips parting like she had something to say. But she didn't. And I didn't need her to. We paid separately. I walked ahead on the way out, back in my apartment. The light had softened through the blinds, turning the room gold at the edges. The envelope sat on the counter, white and clean, waiting like a new page. I opened it slowly. Dear Madeline, we're honored to welcome you as our newest financial literacy mentor. Your experience and voice will empower women taking back control of their futures. I held the letter for a long moment, then placed it inside a folder labeled Start Here. No family crest, no history behind it, just me, and a beginning I had given myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't listening for footsteps outside my door, because I no longer needed someone to choose me. I had already chosen peace. And this time I wasn't giving it back.